Welcome back, everyone. My name is Mo Al-Sumidai again, I'm the chief editor of the Clinical Trial Vanguard, and I have here with me Alisha Garibaldi, who's the CEO of Skylight Health. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell me a bit about what you do at Skylight?
Absolutely. So we are a small, privately owned network. I have 3 different locations in the U.S., one in Burlington, Massachusetts, one in Colorado Springs, obviously Colorado, and then in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So we're a newer clinical research site. We went independent back in January of 2023, but we're a small but mighty team, and we're just excited to be part of the industry and contributing to evidence-based medicine.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. So, Alisha, my first question to you is, given your extensive experience in managing multiple research sites, what advice would you give to site managers looking to optimize their clinical operations? And how can they leverage technology without overwhelming their teams with all this tech?
I think you kind of gave the answer right in that question. It's all about leveraging technology and leveraging technology appropriately. I've really taken the approach of adding one new piece of technology. I'm going to say every couple months that I start with one, we get really comfortable with it, and then I will add on another one. So it's not throwing 8 new technologies to my staff all at one time, since they have to get that from sponsors anyway, so they're already balancing that. So I really try to slowly roll out our internal tech that we've been using.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of challenges would you say exist in rolling out this new tech from your staff?
I think it's really becoming an expert in that specific technology. And because we're so small and because I'm so heavily involved in our operations at this point, I try to become the expert in what we're doing so that I know the system and they can come to me with questions. And then I very much, rather than having the tech provider do the training on it, I will learn, and then I will train our site as it applies to our specific situation. It can be very, very overwhelming though. We just rolled out a CTMS, finally, in February of this year. And it was a massive system to learn and then migrate everything over to. And we pretty much had a go live date to say, I'm cutting off the old system, I'm removing all your access, we are on this system exclusively. And then it was really being heavily involved for that couple-week period while everybody got comfortable. That was probably the biggest one that was challenging to roll out. And then it's learning all of the intricacies of that system and really how to leverage what you're paying for so that you're taking advantage of all of the different facets of the technology to be able to increase your own efficiencies.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting point, because a lot of leaders, they sort of let the employees do most of the work, but that doesn't really set that example of organizational change. But you, by understanding the intricacies of these systems, really sets an example for the organization to follow. Would you say that your organization has followed you because of that leadership?
I'd like to think so, but I'm such a small network. I can't be applied to the massive research organizations, the Vanderbilts, the MGHs, the Tufts, because we're so small and the team is still so connected. But I think, yes, with me knowing so much about the system and not just saying, here, learn it, have fun, best wishes, I think it definitely does help, because then I can really have that level of oversight over what we're doing and know that I'm pinging my team on Microsoft Teams when I'm like, hey, you haven't completed this visit, was the patient not there? And I'll let them know how they're stacking up, especially just between my other sites when I'm doing finances or I'm doing invoicing, to say, hey, there's 50 completed patients per CTMS, but there's only 48 showing up on my invoice. You're missing patients. And then they have to go dig through it. So it's gotten better. It was a little rocky at the start, but I knew that there was going to be that level of challenge with it.
Mm-hmm. So adopting new technology can often be met with the skepticism. And I think we kind of talked about this. So maybe I can go to the next question here. So standardization and a common language really are critical in the life sciences industry. Can you share your insights on why these are essential for improving collaboration across sites and sponsors? And how is Skylight implementing these principles?
Oh, absolutely. I think for us, having our own standardization and consistency trial to trial, it makes it that much easier to roll in sponsor-specific processes. Because if we have our systems, we've outlined in our SOPs how we're using those systems, and we can say to a sponsor, you will find this here, you will find this here, here's your access to these systems, this is how we use them. They come to expect that from us, and the staff at least have that one piece of consistency. As sites, we all know how many different technologies you have when a sponsor brings on a new study and how many new techs you have to learn. And it's not a sponsor problem, it's not a site problem, I think it's an overall industry problem that everybody, I think, is working towards an answer for. But when you have that level of standardization at the site, especially when it comes to eReg, eSource, eConsent, and those basic platforms that you can spread amongst your trials, it really helps when you're adding on a new system or a new process that's trial specific, because at least there's one thing consistent, study to study, that you're just going to come back. If I had a sponsor dictating eReg, and I had a different eReg system for every single study, I'm not even sure I could wrap my head around what kind of a challenge that would be. Even payment systems, that we can keep that internal, and our patients know if they've participated in a couple of studies, they're using the same card. Learning a different payment system study to study it would be incredibly challenging. So be able to have that consistency is very, very valuable as a site. And then having the SOPs to back up to say, this is how we're using it. So it's very outlined, and that documentation is supported if you have to go to your sponsor to say, no, we have our own internal process that we would like to follow. And a lot of the time they're very amenable to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Alisha, from your perspective as a site manager, what advice would you offer sponsors to enhance their collaboration with study sites? And what are some of the best practices that sponsors should adopt to facilitate smoother and more effective partnerships?
I think the biggest thing it comes down to is communication and really outlining expectations with sites. I've had startup processes that have gone so smooth because I've gotten a checklist at the start from the sponsor to say, this is everything that we're going to need from you through the startup process, and I can follow that checklist and get them what they need. And then even if we're finding that something is stalled and I haven't seen a certain document yet, I can poke them because I know what to expect. I just mentioned this actually this morning at a breakfast I was at, that a list of systems and what they're used for is a great tool to have, and it's something that I don't often get from sponsors. There's normally a nice slide in the SIV presentation with all of the different logos from all of the different texts that they're using, but not something that's necessarily going to clearly outline, we're using this system for EDC, this system for IRT, this system for lab, this system for query management. Here are the links, and here are the roles who should have access to this. It's getting access to those systems at the start that can be very, very challenging, and then knowing sponsor to sponsor and keeping track of what's being utilized. For the most part, I think sponsors are always just trying their best, and they're trying to do what they think is going to be best for sites. And I mean, we've noticed a shift in this now with sites being brought into these conversations with sponsors to be able to give that feedback for what's going to work for us based on all of the different trials. So there's always little things here and there, but I think it comes down to that communication and proper documentation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And with rapid pace of tech advancements, how does Skylight Health ensure that these new tools actually meet the needs of your sites without adding that unnecessary complexity? And what lessons have you learned that could benefit other research sites?
I think it's being open to the new technology. I mean, I've been in the industry for my entire career, and I come from the days of iDataFax, when you were quite literally filling out something on paper and faxing it into the EDC system.
Those days.
Those days. And I mean, at the time, you got used to it, and it's changed so drastically. I still remember the number of archive binders that I had. And it's keeping in touch with what's progressing. And then slowly, again, it's using that slow process of getting comfortable. Even when we adopted Viva Site Vault as our EISF, it was adopting that to use for eReg and getting comfortable. And then after that, it was adopting the read and understood workflow and saying, okay, we're gonna start using this moving forward. The next one was saying, okay, this is working really well for us, let's try the digital delegation log, rather than, I think it would have been a much different story if we launched everything all at once. And then again, coming to conferences and hearing from different tech vendors about what they have upcoming and the different solutions that they have, and being open to those conversations is very, very important. But again, not just adopting a technology for the sake of adopting technology, and really thinking, how is this going to fit into my business? Is there a gap in what I'm doing right now? And is this going to solve a gap, or is this going to turn into a bit more of a headache? But again, adopting slowly, getting used to it, and then adding another piece has been really, really valuable for us. I'm still curious to see how we're going to leverage AI. It terrifies me. Just as a whole, I think it's quite scary, but I know that that's the way of the future. And I know at some point, as much as right now I feel like I want to dig my heels in, I'm open to talking to these vendors and how we're going to be able to leverage it to make us better. But it's really understanding how that's going to be used. And again, documenting your own internal processes so that when it is rolled out, it makes sense and your staff are on board. I like to bring my leaders at my sites in when we're launching a new technology, just to make sure that it's going to make sense for them. I'm not seeing patients anymore. I'm not there on the day-to-day, and I need to make sure that it's going to make sense for them, just as sponsors are now making sure that what they're doing is going to make sense for sites.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, having run sites myself, like, we oftentimes face pushback from like the CROs and the CRAs who come with like their traditional ideas, right? Like the delegation log, for example, that's the biggest nightmare, like a paper delegation log every time you have to make a change. How do you convince, CROs and CRAs that the technology is validated, that it does work, that, this is your site's process?
I haven't gotten pushback yet. We've only used the digital delegation log, I think, for 3 studies now, and each time I've pitched and said, this is what we use, this is the template, it's industry standard. Do you have any concerns? There hasn't been that level of pushback. I found I got more pushback when it came to using electronic signatures on a PDF form, but that was just an absolute nightmare, especially because when that e-signature is validated, it comes with 4 more lines of text under it that's going to bleed in, and suddenly you can't read that DOA. When it's digital, it's that much cleaner. And again, as long as you can show that it's 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, I haven't had a hard time rolling out, even with some big sponsors.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And my last question, Alisha, is looking ahead, what are some of the key technological trends or innovations that you believe will have the biggest impact on research in site operations? And how are you preparing to integrate these trends to stay ahead of the industry?
I think this may be a little bit of a naive answer, but I feel like I've already adopted the really big tech pieces that are going to have the biggest benefits for us with increasing efficiencies between the CTMS and eReg. I can't picture what is going to be the next big thing. I don't think we need another system necessarily, although having something that could somehow centralize all of our contact information and emails across all sponsors and CROs, I think would be very, very beneficial, but it's not something that I'm going to adopt personally at my site other than signing up to use that if that suddenly existed. I think in terms of the next big advancement, it's going to go back to that AI piece, and I think that's going to become integrated somehow. I'm just not sure how. I'm not really doing any EMR mining where that's going to be really beneficial for me, but I do still think it's going to start increasing efficiencies for us somewhere, but I'm going to leave that to the tech companies to figure out. But again, it's just being open to what's out there and how it's going to be beneficial, but being hesitant enough to not adopt technology for the sake of adopting technology.
Mm-hmm. So, Alisha, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think that we've covered a lot. And again, I'm not even sure who would necessarily be looking at this, but I think from my experience with adopting technologies, it's being open to changing how things are done. I thought that paper was great and it was so easy. You put your training log on top of your new document and you archived it. And that didn't seem that long ago, but now it seems like the most archaic practice that I could never imagine going back to. So it's just, again, it's staying open, being mindful, and just keeping your pulse on what's going on in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. Alisha Garibaldi, who's CEO of Skylight Health, thank you again.
Thank you so much.